The year is 1959. The world is holding its breath. Every morning, the newspaper on your doorstep screams a new headline of brinkmanship: the Soviet Union, the United States. Two titans, locked in a global standoff so intense, the very air feels charged with the static of impending doom. This is the Cold War, a conflict fought in shadows and whispers, in proxy wars in distant jungles, and in the terrifying, silent race to build bigger bombs, faster jets, and more missiles. The concept of mutual assured destruction isn't just a policy, it's a grim reality hanging over every single person on the planet. Trust is a currency that has been devalued to worthlessness. Espionage is the default language of diplomacy. An American U-2 spy plane is shot down deep in Soviet airspace. KGB sleeper agents are uncovered in the suburbs of New York. This is a world where the only certainty is that your enemy is your enemy, and that line in the sand is drawn in radioactive dust. And then, against this backdrop of pure, unadulterated geopolitical hatred, something happens that makes absolutely no sense. Something that defies every rule of the game they've been playing. In Washington and in Moscow, in the hushed, wood-paneled offices of the highest echelons of power, a decision is made. A document is drafted. It doesn't concern disarmament in Europe. It doesn't address the crisis in Cuba. It doesn't involve the space race. Instead, it focuses on the most remote, the most desolate, the most seemingly irrelevant place on Earth: Antarctica. On December 1st, 1959, 12 nations, including the most bitter rivals on the planet, put pen to paper. They signed the Antarctic Treaty. The headlines, buried behind news of rockets and riots, were bland, bureaucratic. It was framed as a noble, scientific endeavor. A treaty to preserve a continent for peace and science, to demilitarize it, to share all research findings openly. Now press pause, rewind that tape. Look at it again, but this time through the lens of sheer, unvarnished realism. At the absolute peak of the most dangerous ideological conflict in human history, the United States and the Soviet Union, nations that would literally go to the brink of nuclear war over missiles in Cuba, just 3 years later, suddenly agreed to play nice. They agreed to completely withdraw military interests from a landmass larger than Europe. They agreed to share their most sensitive scientific discoveries with each other. They became, on paper, partners. Does that sound logical to you? Does that sound like the behavior of paranoid, security-obsessed superpowers staring each other down across a nuclear abyss? Or does it sound like the behavior of two people who, while walking through a dark forest, hear the exact same terrifying growl from the bushes? They might hate each other, but in that singular moment of primal fear, they drop their knives and back away together, eyes locked on the unseen threat, making a silent pact not to mention the growl, not to investigate it, but simply to get out of the forest and never, ever speak of it again. The Antarctic Treaty was not an act of diplomacy. It was an act of containment. It was panic, meticulously dressed up in the respectable clothing of international law. It was a global sigh of relief from the world's most powerful men, not because they had achieved peace, but because they had successfully agreed to put a lock on a door behind which something unimaginable lay waiting. This is not a story about ice and penguins. This is a story about the thing behind the door, the thing that forced mortal enemies to become reluctant allies, the thing they found that they are still to this day desperately trying to keep us from discovering. To understand the panic of 1959, we have to go back to the event that likely triggered it. We have to travel to 1946, in the raw, victorious aftermath of World War II. The United States military is the most powerful force the world has ever seen. Its navy rules the waves, its industrial might is unquestioned, and it turns its gaze south, far south. The man chosen to lead this unprecedented endeavor is Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, a living legend, a pioneering aviator, the first to fly over both the North and South Poles, a figure of American grit and exploration. The mission assigned to him is dubbed Operation Highjump, and it is, by any measure, staggering. This is no simple scientific expedition. This is a full-scale, Naval invasion of a continent. Byrd's armada consists of 13 ships, including the mighty aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, the seaplane tender USS Pine Island, a submarine, 2 destroyers, and multiple tankers and supply vessels. He commands over 4,700 men, dozens of aircraft including helicopters, fighter planes, and massive 6-engine reconnaissance planes. The firepower and logistical support are immense, more than many nations possessed in their entire militaries at the time. The official story, released to the press, was a masterclass in benign misdirection. It was to be a training mission, a chance to test men and equipment in extreme cold weather conditions, a 6 to 8 month mission to map and photograph the Antarctic coastline. It was, they said, primarily a military mission to train naval personnel, test ships, planes, and equipment under frigid zone conditions. But the scale betrays the objective. You do not use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. This level of investment, so soon after a devastating world war, suggests an objective of immense importance. Rumors swirled even then. Was it to establish strategic bases, to hunt down fugitive Nazi U-boats rumored to have fled to the polar regions? Or was it something else? Something driven by intelligence we are still not privy to? The fleet arrived in the Ross Sea in late December 1946. The operation began with an air of confident purpose. Planes were launched from the rolling deck of the carrier, tasked with mapping thousands of miles of unknown territory. Then things began to go wrong. Not just the expected hardships of Antarctic exploration, but strange, sudden, and catastrophic failures. A PBM Mariner seaplane, the George I, crashes on a remote mountainside during a blizzard under mysterious circumstances, leaving 3 men dead. Rescue efforts are nightmarish. Other aircraft report bizarre instrument failures. Compasses spin wildly. Radio communications are filled with static and strange, unidentifiable interference. Whispers begin. Among the crew, stories of unidentified objects, not aircraft but something else, shadowing their planes, performing impossible aerial maneuvers. Then, the most baffling event of all. In early February 1947, after a mere 8 weeks on station, the entire mighty task force is ordered to abort the mission. They pack up with a speed that borders on panic. They leave behind equipment, supplies. They scramble to get their ships out of the ice and head north. The official reason: the early advance of the Antarctic winter. But Admiral Byrd, a man who had spent his life in polar extremes, was caught off guard by the weather. It doesn't track. The mission was planned for 8 months. It was abandoned after 8 weeks. This wasn't a conclusion, it was a rout. Upon his return, Byrd gave a cryptic interview to a Chilean newspaper, El Mercurio. His words were far from the standard military briefing. He spoke of a land of everlasting mystery. He warned that the United States must adopt a policy of defense against the invasion of the country by hostile planes coming from the polar regions. He mentioned objects that could fly from pole to pole with incredible speed. The Navy swiftly downplayed his statements. He was tired, they said. He was misquoted, but the seed was planted. Operation Highjump, the largest naval expedition ever sent to Antarctica, did not end in triumph. It ended in a hurried, chaotic, and permanent retreat. It left the US military with a terrifying and expensive question. What, or who, down there, was so powerful that it could send the world's greatest navy running for home? The abrupt and humiliating end of Operation Highjump in early 1947 did not close the book on Antarctica. It merely ended the public chapter. Behind the scenes, in the classified vaults of the Pentagon and the Kremlin, the book was just being opened. The 12-year period between Highjump's failure and the signing of the treaty in 1959 was not a period of silence. It was a period of silent, frantic, and deeply paranoid activity. This was the catalyst. This is where the real panic set in. Imagine the debriefing rooms. Admiral Byrd, a national hero, is forced to explain to a panel of stern-faced generals and intelligence officials why his invincible fleet was forced into a premature retreat. What did he tell them? His public comments were strange enough. His Classified testimony must have been earth-shattering. The loss of life, the loss of multi-million-dollar aircraft, the national embarrassment, all of it had to be justified. The data collected by the remaining planes, the photographs, the magnetic readings, the geological surveys, was analyzed not by civilian scientists, but by intelligence analysts with top-secret clearance. What anomalies did they find in that data? Shapes under the ice that defied natural explanation. Radiation signatures that didn't match any known element. Evidence of structures. The United States wasn't the only player. The Soviet Union, watching Highjump's sudden departure with keen interest, would have drawn its own conclusions. Their conclusion would not have been bad weather. They would have assumed the Americans had found something of immense value and were covering it up. This triggered their own series of clandestine expeditions. The Soviet Antarctic expedition program began in the mid-1950s, and from the outset, it had a distinctly military and strategic flavor, mirroring the American approach. This created a terrifying feedback loop of paranoia. Every American sensor deployed, every Soviet icebreaker sent south, was seen by the other side not as science, but as espionage. Every strange reading, every unexplained aerial sighting by a pilot, every anomalous magnetic field was logged, analyzed, and filed away in a growing dossier of the inexplicable. The theories within these secret circles must have been wild. Did the Nazis truly establish a last redoubt, a base called Neuschwabenland, as some of their pre-war expeditions had claimed? Had they discovered some ancient, hyper-advanced technology buried in the ice? Were the flying objects reported by Byrd some form of residual automated defense system for a long-lost civilization? Or were they something active, something that viewed the sudden influx of military hardware as an intrusion? The timing is the most critical clue. The treaty was signed in 1959. This was the same year the infamous UFO incident at Red Springs, North Carolina occurred, where military police reported engaging a strange craft. The world was becoming increasingly aware of the UFO phenomenon. The space race was kicking into high gear with the Soviet launch of Sputnik. Humanity was literally reaching for the stars and finding that the cosmos might be far more crowded and strange than anyone had imagined. In this context, Antarctica transformed in the minds of strategists. It was no longer just a barren wasteland. It was a potential beachhead, a backdoor. If there was a non-human intelligence engaging with Earth, the vast, unmonitored emptiness of Antarctica was the perfect place for it to operate undisturbed. The thought of the Soviets, or worse, the Americans, stumbling into an active conflict with such a force was the ultimate nightmare scenario. A war on two fronts, one against a human enemy and one against an unknown, unimaginable one. The Antarctic. Treaty, therefore, was the only logical solution. It was a geopolitical circuit breaker. It was a desperate, white-knuckled agreement between two drivers heading for a head-on collision to instead both swerve off the road. They agreed to mutually withdraw, to stand down, to turn the entire continent into a neutral, demilitarized laboratory, not out of a spirit of scientific cooperation, but out of a shared, terrifying consensus. Whatever is down there is beyond our understanding and beyond our ability to control. Our only option is to quarantine it and hope it doesn't notice us. The treaty was their way of putting a giant "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. To truly see the treaty for what it is, we must move past the press releases and the feel-good rhetoric about international scientific cooperation. We must read the text itself, line by line, and ask the critical question: what do these rules actually accomplish in practice? The devil, as always, is not in the broad strokes, but in the meticulously crafted details. This document is not a declaration of peace, it is a manual for containment. Article 1. Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only. There shall be prohibited, inter alia, any measures of a military nature, such as the establishment of military bases and fortifications, the carrying out of military maneuvers, as well as the testing of any type of weapons. On the surface, this is noble. But consider the context of 1959. The United States and the USSR were actively testing nuclear bombs in the atmosphere over the Pacific. They were conducting massive military maneuvers in Germany and the Korean DMZ. Their entire economies were geared for war. Yet here, on a continent with vast strategic potential, a continent that could host hidden missile silos, submarine pens, or early warning radar arrays that could see an entire hemisphere, they simply agreed to ban it all. Why? Because the potential strategic advantage of militarizing Antarctica was vastly outweighed by the catastrophic risk of what might happen if two human militaries started a fight there. It wasn't that they wanted peace, it was that they were terrified of what a war might awaken. Article 5. Any nuclear explosions in Antarctica and the disposal there of radioactive waste material shall be prohibited. Again, this seems like forward-thinking environmentalism, but in 1959, environmentalism was not a primary global concern. Radioactive fallout from tests was a known and accepted hazard of the Cold War, so why specifically ban it here? One compelling theory is that the unique geophysical properties of Antarctica, or what lies beneath it, react unpredictably with radioactive material. There are whispers from those early surveys of strange energy readings, of magnetic vortices that could potentially amplify or distort nuclear reactions in unpredictable ways. They weren't protecting the environment, they were avoiding a catastrophic experiment with an unknown variable. Article 4. No acts or activities taking place while the present treaty is in force shall constitute a basis for asserting, supporting, or denying a claim to territorial sovereignty in Antarctica. No new claim or enlargement of an existing claim shall be asserted while the present treaty is in force. This is the masterstroke. This is the clause that truly reveals the treaty's purpose. By freezing all territorial claims, the founding nations did something brilliant. They made it legally impossible for anyone to own the place. If you can't own it, you can't legally exploit it. You can't send in corporate mining crews to drill for the massive oil and mineral reserves we know lie under the ice. You can't establish a sovereign colony to conduct independent, unrestricted archaeology. You can't build a city. Every single thing that happens in Antarctica must be done under the umbrella of scientific research, and that research must be approved and shared within the treaty system. This creates a perfect, self-policing information filter. Any scientist who discovers something world-shattering, a city, a machine, a biological entity, does not own that discovery. They are obligated to report it to their national program, which is then obligated to share it with the other treaty members. This creates a closed loop. It ensures that any monumental discovery is first vetted, analyzed, and, if necessary, suppressed by a committee of the world's most powerful governments before the public ever hears a whisper. The treaty established a system of observers who can inspect any nation's facilities at any time to ensure compliance. Think about that. The US can, in theory, send inspectors to a Russian base and vice versa. This isn't about trust, it's about mutual assurance. It's a way for each nation to look the others in the eye and say, "You're not digging where you shouldn't be, are you? You're not trying to reverse engineer that thing we all found, right? Because we're watching you." It is a pact of mutual distrust, designed to ensure mutual compliance with the overarching goal. Leave it alone. The treaty, therefore, is the smoking gun. It is not a document that celebrates discovery. It is a document designed to prevent discovery. It is a legal fortress built around a mystery, constructed not to keep us out, but to keep what is inside in. The panic of 1959 did not subside. It became institutionalized. The temporary containment strategy hardened into a permanent, sophisticated, and multi-layered lockdown. In the 21st century, the guardians of the secret are not just soldiers with guns stationed on the ice, though they are there in the form of military support personnel for various national programs. The real guardians are far more effective. They are bureaucrats, algorithms, and access protocols. Let's talk about access first. You cannot simply buy a ticket to Antarctica. You can't book a flight to the interior on Expedia. Tourist visits are heavily restricted to a few coastal areas on the Antarctic Peninsula, under the watchful eyes of licensed guides who stick to predetermined paths. These are carefully managed day trips, a theatrical performance of exploration designed to give the illusion of access while guaranteeing you see nothing you're not supposed to see. To actually go to the continent proper, to work at a base like McMurdo or Amundsen Scott, you must be part of an official national Antarctic program. The application process is intense. You undergo rigorous background checks, psychological evaluations, and medical screenings. You sign a mountain of non-disclosure agreements. Once you are there, your communications are monitored. Your internet access is heavily filtered and controlled. Your movements are restricted. You are there to do a specific job, and that is all. The scientists are the perfect cover story. Their legitimate published work on climate change and marine biology provides a constant stream of believable, normal data that keeps the public and media focused on the approved narrative. It's the perfect hiding place, in plain sight. Then, there is the control of imagery. We live in an age of technological marvels. We have rovers sending back 4K resolution panoramas from Mars. We have satellite constellations that can provide real-time video of anywhere on the planet. Yet when it comes to Antarctica, we hit a digital wall. Open Google Earth, fly south. You will notice something strange. While most of the world is available in stunning high resolution, vast swathes of Antarctica are blurry, pixelated, or obscured by artificial cloud cover. Some of this can be explained by the technical challenges of mapping a featureless white landscape, but not all of it. The patterns of obfuscation are too deliberate. Specific coordinates, often those associated with strange surface anomalies or the locations of Byrd's old flight paths, are consistently and perfectly hidden. Who controls this? The data from commercial satellites is often sold to or licensed by government agencies, the same governments that signed the treaty. It is a simple matter to request or demand that certain areas be digitally altered before public release. It's a soft censorship, a digital curtain drawn across the stage. The gatekeepers are a silent global alliance. It includes government ministers in Washington, Moscow, and London. It includes three-letter agency directors who classify documents for 70 years or more. It includes the executives of private corporations that provide logistics and tech support to the bases, all of whom are bound by stringent government contracts. It includes the editors of major scientific journals who know which lines of inquiry are off-limits and which papers will never see publication. This modern lockdown is so effective because it is invisible. There are no barbed wire fences around the entire continent. Instead, there is a bureaucratic maze. There is a digital filter. There is a system of peer pressure and funding allocation that ensures curious scientists learn to stop asking the wrong questions. The message is clear if unspoken. You can study the ice, the weather, the penguins. But do not look down. Do not ask what is beneath. Do not wonder what caused that strange metallic reading 5 kilometers below the Vostok station. Your career, your funding, your reputation, they all depend on you looking the other way. The Guardians don't need to patrol the ice. They patrol the flow of information, and they are more vigilant than any sentry. So we arrive at the ultimate question, the heart of the mystery that the treaty was designed to bury. What did they find? We are left to piece together the truth. From fragments, from whispers, from the cracks in the official story. The theories are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they often intertwine, creating a tapestry of possibilities more terrifying than any single thread. The ancient civilization theory, the ruins of pre-ice age history. This theory posits that Antarctica was not always a frozen wasteland. Geological and fossil evidence proves it was once a temperate forested continent, possibly even connected to the lost hypothetical landmass of Gondwana. What if a sophisticated civilization thrived there tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago? A cataclysm, a pole shift, an asteroid impact, or their own advanced technology gone wrong, flash froze the entire continent, preserving it in a state of perfect archaeological suspension. The pyramids, seen in satellite imagery, dismissed by mainstream geologists as nunataks, rock peaks shaped by wind erosion, could be the eroded tips of immense buried structures. The stories of Admiral Byrd's land of everlasting mystery could be a hint of finding the outskirts of this frozen metropolis. The implications are universe-shattering. It would mean human history, or the history of our intelligence on Earth, is orders of magnitude older and more complex than we ever imagined. It would rewrite our understanding of biology, physics, and our own origins. For governments and religious institutions built on a certain historical narrative, this truth would be destabilizing to the point of collapse. Quarantining it wouldn't be a choice. It would be a necessity for maintaining global order. The Nazi refuge theory, Base 211, New Schwabenland. This theory is darker, rooted in documented history. We know for a fact the Nazis were obsessed with the occult and the polar regions. They sent a significant expedition to Antarctica in 1938-39, named the Schwabenland Expedition, to claim a vast territory they called Neuschwabenland. They dropped thousands of marker flags from the air and allegedly used their advanced seismic technology to map potential underground cave systems. The rumor is that after losing the war, a convoy of U-boats loaded with top Nazi scientists, SS officials, and advanced technology blueprints fled to Antarctica to establish a last redoubt. Base 211, Operation Highjump, then suddenly makes sense as a military mission to root out this remaining Nazi threat. Its catastrophic failure could be explained not by weather, but by encountering a hidden enemy possessing technology far beyond their own, perhaps even flying discs based on Nazi bell-shaped craft prototypes. The 1959 treaty, in this light, is a pact between the victors of W2 foes, who discovered that the war never really ended. It just moved to a new hidden theater. They realized that engaging this remnant Nazi force could lead to a conflict they might not win, or worse, unleash technologies they couldn't control. So they agreed to a ceasefire, to quarantine the Nazis in their icy fortress, on the condition they never emerge. A frozen Cold War in the most literal sense, the extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial outpost theory, the active presence. This is the most profound and terrifying theory. It suggests that Antarctica is not just a tomb of a dead past, but an active site. The strange aerial phenomena reported by Byrd and countless pilots since, the objects that could fly from pole to pole with incredible speed, are not of human origin. Antarctica, with its isolation, its potential for hidden bases under the ice or in the vast, unexplored subglacial lakes like Lake Vostok, is the perfect location for a non-human intelligence to observe or interact with our planet. The treaty, then, is the result of humanity's first terrifying contact. Both superpowers, through their separate expeditions, realized they were not the apex intelligence on the planet. They were like ants stumbling across a human construction site. The owners of the site made it clear, through demonstrations of overwhelming technological superiority, the downing of aircraft, the disabling of ships, that they were not to be disturbed. The treaty is our species' collective response. It is our agreement to the sign that says, "Keep out." We agreed to stop poking the bear. We agreed to pretend the bear isn't there. We militarized the space around Earth with satellites and missiles to look outward for threats, all the while knowing the most significant threat might already be here, sleeping under the ice, and our only hope for survival is to never, ever wake it up. The truth is likely a horrifying combination of all three. Perhaps the Nazis, in their excavations, found the ruins of the ancient civilization and accidentally awakened or attracted the third factor. The possibilities are endless, and that is the true nature of the secret. It's not a single fact, but a bottomless pit of existential dread that our leaders looked into and decided unanimously to put a lid on it. The Antarctic Treaty System remains in force today. It has been expanded and strengthened over the decades, not weakened. It comes up for periodic review, and every time, without fail, it is unanimously reaffirmed. There is no debate in the United Nations. No nation, not a resurgent China, not a resource-hungry nation, challenges its core tenets. The silence is absolute. The consensus is total. This is the most telling evidence of all. In a world perpetually on the verge of conflict, where nations can't agree on climate change, trade, or basic human rights, they all agree on one thing. Antarctica must remain off-limits. The door must stay locked. We are left in a state of perpetual curiosity, forever staring at the edges of the map. We analyze the blurred pixels on Google Earth. We read the declassified documents, heavily redacted, released only when they are decades old, and their secrets are no longer relevant to the current guardians. We listen to the whispers from retired personnel, the stories told in retirement homes by old men who served on those early missions, stories that are dismissed as the ramblings of the aged. The continent itself is changing. Climate change is melting the ice shelves, revealing more of the coastline. Each new revelation is met with a swift response from the treaty nations. New protected areas are declared. Access is further restricted under new environmental guidelines. Is this a genuine concern for a fragile ecosystem? Or is it a convenient excuse to ensure that as the ice recedes, the secrets it reveals are seen only by the approved eyes of the gatekeepers? The greatest mystery on Earth is not hidden in a lost city or a buried tomb. It is not a single artifact waiting to be found. It is an entire continent, a vast white stage upon which the true history of our planet and perhaps its future is playing out. And we, the public, are not allowed in the theater. We are forced to listen at the door, trying to decipher the plot from the muffled sounds and the frightened expressions of the ushers who occasionally step outside for air. The treaty was never about peace. It was born from a fear so profound, so existential, that it transcended nationalism, ideology, and hatred. It was the product of a realization that some truths are not enlightening, they are destructive, that some knowledge does not set you free. It places a burden on you that no person and no society can bear. The snow continues to fall on Antarctica, as it has for millennia. It buries the evidence. It silences the past. It preserves the secret. The treaty is its guardian, a monument, not to human cooperation, but to human limitation. It is the acknowledgement that there are some doors once opened, can never be closed again. And so the most powerful nations on Earth have made a pact, a blood oath signed not in ink, but in shared terror, to leave the door locked, to let the sleeping giant lie. Until that changes, the truth remains, the frozen in time, a secret we are simply not allowed to know.